Welcome in, Buckeye backers. We got Scott Reed from Duck Sports Authority. Also has Flock Talk, the podcast. Man, you just started doing that this year, right?
I did, yeah. I've done an article series I call Flock Talk every week. It's more of an opinion piece that I do. And when I took over the site in July, I knew I wanted to start getting a podcast done, and I just had to sort of swallow the bullet and do it. My first episode was actually a offensive lineman wanted to do an interview with us, so we went ahead and did that as our first episode. And just trying to get some things figured out, cameras, things like that, just little things that I haven't really done yet, and where my studio, quote unquote, is also my dining room, and so I have to use the virtual background for a reason.
There you go. All right, let me get to the intro, and we'll get right back with keys to this game, man. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be huge. The rematch at the Rose Bowl, baby. Can't wait. Can't wait.
Under pressure, throws it, incomplete, the Buckeyes win.
It's so easy to be average. The hell with that. We don't want to coach average. Did you push yourself to be great today? Did you do it? If you didn't do it, you lost today.
Bill Jones gets the snap, fakes a run, drops back the pass, fires long, down the right side, going toward the end zone, and it is caught! Touchdown! And it's Devin Smith again.
Samuel cuts it back. Ohio State wins.
Pitches to Archer Griffin, number 45, and Griffin fighting up the sideline, and he gets it into Michigan territory. A great individual effort from the 20-yard line. Eddie Jordan finds a hole.
Smith in trouble, spins away from it. 40, 45, 50, 35. Troy Smith
to throw, steps up, delivers deep down the field. He's got a receiver. Olave, touchdown, Buckeyes! Howard runs it. First down, Moore slides down inside the 40. Ohio State.
He gives up a lot of chunk plays in the air. Buckeyes have four looking for a touchdown end zone. Jeremiah Smith, his second tonight.
That was the difference, man. In a couple weeks, 3 weeks for Ohio State. That right there, just getting the ball to that man, Jeremiah Smith. What is the difference this time around going in from October 12th, playing in the Rose Bowl now? We all know it means more. You get the chance to advance to the next round in the playoffs. But what do you think the matchup difference is? How has Oregon grown since October 12th?
You know, they're the same as they were, but I think different in that there's some confidence level. A lot of times you go into a game like when Oregon went into the Ohio State game, your confidence is there, but it's not there. You know what I mean? You feel you have confidence. There's an apprehensive confidence to it until you face that team. Because let's be fair, when you're going through those first 5-6 weeks of the year, Oregon played Boise State. That's a better team than I think people gave them credit for at the time. But everything else was, you don't know what you really have until you face something similar to what you are. And I think that gives some confidence. The other thing that's different is, Oregon went on an 8-week stretch without a bye and all conference games, and they were beat up by the end of that stretch. They did everything they could to load manage some of the players. There was one game, I believe it was the Maryland game, that Jordan James had 7 carries. But he bucketed that around 20 plus carry games on each side of that. So it's not like he wasn't carrying the ball, but there was a lot of load management happening. Jeffrey Bossa wasn't playing as much. And they got the offensive line healthy. Dave Yulee came back, and they just got better at offensive line than they were early in the season. To me, that is the biggest thing for Oregon, is the offensive line is healthy, and they've got a little bit of extra depth that they gained during the middle of the season during that 8-game stretch where they didn't have a bye, and everybody was beat up, and they had to get some other players in there just to get some breaks for people. And I think that changed a little bit. They are the same team, though, offensively. They run the ball the same number of times. They pass the ball about the same. Everything they do didn't change structurally. I think they're just healthier right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. They kind of developed in a different way, both teams. Like Oregon had that stretch run in the beginning where they were like struggling a little bit against Boise State, who we found out is a playoff team, better than what we thought. And then against Idaho, we did not see that coming, and everyone was like, maybe Oregon isn't as good. Well, they had that stretch run. I guess they also had a down game, if you want to call it, against Wisconsin, against those Badgers, but they won. In Camp Randall, that's a hard place to play. Buckeyes know that. Whether Wisconsin's a good team or not, it's just tough to travel there, and it's tough to go against that team in Madison for sure every year. They can always put together a game. Ohio State was different. They needed those losses. They needed to be beat down. I think that they were a little headstrong, both the coaches and the players, thinking they could just show up and win games without having to really push the envelope, right? They didn't need to scheme as much. They could just out-athlete anyone. And that's where the defense found out, was that game October 12th, where we have to actually try to do things a little bit differently. We're not just going to come and win this because, we have all the best players. There's other teams out there.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I'll tell you I know a little bit about Chip Kelly. He can be stubborn, and I thought that's the way he approached Michigan. He was too stubborn. He did things that's not the Ohio State offense that even I saw all season long. That's straight up blocking, thinking you're going to 3 yards in a cloud of dust over Michigan because they're down this year. I don't know. I didn't understand the game plan. I don't talk with Chip anymore, so it's not like he's going to tell me what the game plan was, but that was stubbornness, in my opinion, on Chip's part. He's been stubborn before. He did it against Auburn, 4 straight plays right into Nick Fairley in the national championship game in 2010-11. He was being stubborn. There were other plays there that he tried to stubborn himself into it. But I agree. What's that?
I think that's part of it. I just don't know that they had the cohesion on the offensive line. They didn't even know where they wanted to play people on the offensive line at that point, which you guys kind of made a point about this last night in your podcast, and we talked about it on ours as well. You get 3 weeks off, you can kind of get Jackson over to offensive tackle and make him feel comfortable, because it's like a fall camp, right? 3 weeks, you got time to put in plays that you weren't running. You got time to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of all of that offensive line. You had some of the younger guys that grew up. Luke Montgomery grew up and he played well at at guard. So they have the pieces and they move stuff around even on the offensive line. They feel a little more comfortable. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are, so they can call a little bit better game plan.
Yeah, and I think Don Jackson, the thing is, the footwork, everything you do as a tackle is 100% different than what you do as a guard. And I don't know the last time he played tackle, and sure as heck don't know the last time he played left tackle, but it wasn't against the kind of competition he's facing now. And I think it takes time to learn that kind of a position. No matter how good of an athlete you are and how good you are as a blocker, the footwork's different, the handwork is different. Adjusting to the speed of an edge rusher is a lot different than adjusting to what's happening on the interior of the offensive line. And that 3 weeks probably was crucial for him more than anybody else on that team, I would think. Just from understanding what he needed to do better, having a little bit more time to study film, to understand and work on technique, work on some things that he couldn't work on during every week when there's a game the next weekend.
Absolutely. Doug Shepard says, I have my Buckeye blinders on with earmuffs. I ain't trying to hear or see anything unless it's sunshine and great news. Well, so far, everything's good. I didn't see anyone on the sidelines today at that limited scope of practice that we got. We got to watch some people stretch and do some warm-ups and things like that today. It's a damn shame these two teams aren't meeting in the championship game. And you talked about that earlier too. Whoever gets past this, they're probably going to be odds-in favorites to win the national title. And it's because they're playing each other that they aren't now. There's a reason why Texas is the odds-in favorite, because one of these two teams is going to lose. and everyone thinks Texas is going to win. And no one knows which team is going to win this game for sure. I mean, 2.5 point spread means Vegas isn't even sure.
And it's still, I was thinking about that when you asked me what had changed. I thought about it in advance, and the answer was everything and nothing. Nothing has really changed in the fact that these are still the two most talented teams in the country right now. If you look top to bottom, who has the most talent on their roster, I think it's these two teams. And it's going to be a close game unless something crazy happens with turnovers which you can't project. I mean, Dillion Gabriel's thrown, I think, 1 interception in the last 5 games. So I do not expect him to turn over the ball much. But unless something crazy happens, like Will Howard throws a couple of pick sixes early or Dillion Gabriel does the same, it's going to be a close game. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter. It's going to come down to a last possession, most likely. And whoever gets through this game should be the favorite to win the national title because nothing Texas has done has impressed me this season. They really have, I guess you could call some of their wins impressive early in the season, but I just don't see anything.
Clemson was really the most impressive game, right?
It was.
That's their only top 25 win.
And Clemson is good, but they were a 12 seed for a reason. I think the two tough teams they played, they lost. The two tough games Texas played, they lost. And Georgia, with their second string quarterback, beat Texas. I don't see them being able to beat Ohio State or Oregon. And I think when the odds come out after this game, whoever wins this game, the odds are going to come out. That team is likely going to be favored over, we'll assume, Texas. And it doesn't matter if Texas or ASU, whoever wins this game is going to be favored over that team.
You know what? I'm going to switch subjects here because, I mean, that's obvious. It's going to be. I mean, maybe you could say Georgia's going to sneak in there if they look good with their second string quarterback. We'll find that out, next week. But you mentioned a lot of things. You had a wide receiver coming back. Well, Holden, because he didn't spit on anyone recently, is going to be in the game, right?
Yep.
And you mentioned him over the middle. Like if you're guarding the outside, he's going to be able to reach in the middle. And it's kind of like Emeka Egbuka did to Oregon last time around. These receivers on both sides are stacked. Like everything you said in talking about Oregon, I was like, that translates exactly to Ohio State too, with having 3 receivers on the outside, maybe even 4 if you count some of their backups too, with Tate and Ennis.
Yeah, and I thought Tate played really well over the second half of the season. If I thought that's a guy that's somebody who could be a surprise player of the type game, one of those guys that could have a breakout, because if Oregon is able to nobody's going to shut down Jeremiah Smith completely because he's just too big, too strong, too fast. But if Oregon's able to limit what he does explosively, and if they're able to limit Egbuka, how are they going to also then cover Carnell Tate or G. Scott, right? How are they going to cover all 4 of those guys and then make sure that nobody's leaking out of the backfield on a wheel route or those other things? And Ohio State has the same kind of weapons that Oregon does. Some of them better, and like Jeremiah Smith is better than anybody Oregon has right now. If you looked at long-term potential, Jeremiah Smith is an NFL guy. In fact, my guy Drew Davis on our show last night compared him to Julio Jones, who Drew played with at Atlanta for the Falcons. So he knows, and he said that's the guy that he reminds him the most of. And I can see that comparison. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, good hands, good routes. He's not just a guy out there running goes every time. He understands route trees. He understands how to use his body. He understands leverage. He understands coverages. He understands where he needs to be based on zone versus man. So you're not going to shut him down. So
the second best freshman in the nation.
Probably. Ryan Williams is also really good. I agree.
I can't remember who it was that got picked for freshman of the year. It was someone else though. He finished second, and Ohio State fans get a laugh out of that because, he's better than most seniors.
I mean, Ryan Williams is the only other freshman I could think of that would be the Alabama receiver that would be up there.
Ryan Williams. Gosh, I can't remember who that was. I'll have to look that up if we get to a break or anything. But, but you have receivers across the board, too. I love watching Tez Johnson, man. He's all over the field. Just electric, can stop on a dime, can start. He's quick side to side. He's quick straight ahead. He's the guy that you want to get the ball in space. Obviously, Evans, man, he had that game against Burke last go around in October 12th. And I don't think, and I think you mentioned it too, I don't think that Ohio State's going to give up those deep plays anymore. So it's going to be a little bit different how they're going to manufacture them. Yes, there's going to be one or two, but they're not going to be 69-yard bombs down the field because they're playing on an island the entire game.
Yeah, I think they'll have to throw a little bit more zone. And it made sense what they did because coming into that game, really the only receiver who had a lot of success was Tez Johnson. And so you say, if you're going to say, let's take Tez out, you have to pick your poison. They pick their poison. Do I think that poison is a better thing to pick? Would you rather Oregon take shots downfield, which are 50-50 at best, or take those underneath balls for 10 yards that go into 15 to 20 and they're 80% because they're easier throws? If I'm a defensive coordinator, I make sure everything stays in front of me and I don't let those plays happen down the field, because explosion plays are the difference in a lot of games in college football. Whoever wins the explosive play battle and the turnover battle, but that explosive play battle, Oregon had a ton of explosive plays, and that was a big difference in that game. And if you limit that and you force a team to get down the field and then say, we have a really good red zone defense and we're going to stop you and we're not going to let you get over the top on us, we're going to make you beat us in that compressed area. And that's tough to do against really good teams.
Yeah, Doug mentions the running backs. We're not just talking about wide receivers here on both sides. You mentioned you have a guy coming back from injury. Was it Noah? I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Noah Whittington tore his ACL last season. And he was ready. He's 100% at the beginning of the season, but I don't think the confidence level was there. And if you've ever had a major knee injury as a running back, you'll understand that the mental aspect of coming back takes time. And I don't think he was fully there. And I think Ted put it out yesterday. He said when he laid out that defender for Illinois, I think that's when he was back. That's when mentally he knew he was back. He could run like he was before. And Doug is right. Trevion is playing really, really well. I looked at, for our site, I wrote an article just about what the Ohio State offense has done in the last 6 games, not the whole season, because that last 6 games is really critical. And I think he's played really well. He's averaging like 6.2 yards per carry in the last 6 games. Just really playing really well, and very similar to Jordan James in the way they're built, the way they play, the type of back they are. And he's tough. And the fact that they also have Quinshon Judkins, that makes the running game tough. And if you looked at the last game, just like with Michigan, who won the rushing battle also won this game. So explosive plays, rushing. You look at those 3 things: explosive plays, rushing, and turnovers. You win those 3 battles, it's tough to beat that team, right? And so I think Ohio State, if they can run the ball for the 200-plus range, they're going to have a really good shot at winning this game. And they don't need Will Howard to make big plays down the field if they run the ball that well.
Yeah, and Trevion's used a little bit more to get into space. Jordan James, I feel like he has more power than Travion Henderson. I mean, Travion Henderson can do it, and Jordan James definitely has that breakaway ability too. He just seems like he can run people over a little bit more. Travion has more finesse. He has run people over, but he likes to get out and get running quick.
Yeah, I think you're not going to run straight up the gut against Ohio State anyway. So Jordan James they'll run some there, but that's not going to be their bread and butter. The bread and butter that he made success on in the first matchup was that stuff to the outside, to the 4 and the 6 hole, right? That's getting off the outside a little bit and making cuts. And that's where he's really good, is that foot in the ground, one cut. He's not a Barry Sanders, and he's not going to dance. He's not going to do multiple cuts. It's going to be one cut, foot in the ground, and try to take guys one-on-one. And he likes contact. I think that may be the difference with him and Trevion, is he loves the contact. He looks for contact sometimes to be that workhorse back. And I do like that. It's tough to defend good running backs, because if they have good vision, good power, good speed, tackling in space, right? That's what defenses have to do, is tackle in space. And if you make a guy's miss, that is a big thing at extending drives. That's, you got to extend drives. You got to keep the chain moving. You got to keep the clock rolling. And I think people lost sight of that in the first matchup, kind of how the teams used the clock to their advantage from controlling it with first downs and not just it wasn't just explosive plays; those helped. But Ohio State, I believe, had possession advantage in that first game, and they had more first downs.
Well, yeah, the turnovers is kind of what led to a little bit of that because they had a quick score after that Junkins fumble, which is interesting because we just mentioned how good Junkins is here in the comments, and he really is. He's a short yardage back, and he's explosive. Like, he's the one that likes the contact a little bit more, probably a little bit better at reading the cutback lanes and the holes at times. Sometimes Henderson tends to miss some of the holes, but Junkins is a little bit more patient. So I want to get back to what's different about Ohio State. We talked about what's different about Oregon. Ohio State had time to develop their offensive line, but on the defensive side of the ball, Ohio State has really come into their own, where we had Sonny Styles, who was a safety the years prior and in high school, has moved up to linebacker. Some thought he would even come to the point where he would be a defensive end. Hasn't been needed there. He's fit in his spot at linebacker, and he knows what to do. He's a good guy to spy, along with if they're moving downs up like they've been talking about, to be more of a almost hybrid between middle linebacker and safety, more in the middle of the field, be closer to the action where he can get to the run game and to the pass game as much as he can. The defense has developed a little bit more to be a little bit more shifty, running more stunts, running more loops, rather than just going right at it like they did against Oregon the first time around.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some really good development in the defensive backfield. Now, obviously, they haven't played quite the same level of wide receiver talent since then. But I see more combo coverages. I don't see as much, like you said, man on an island and taking your chances with that. I see a little bit better variety in the way that they're defending the passes. Mm-hmm. They did a good job against Tennessee in that they didn't just say put Burke on an island, because we saw what happens when you put a guy on an island too often. It's still college football. It's still college football, and it's not the same as the NFL where you can put a cornerback out there on the island and they shut people down for most of the game. Mm-hmm. People get away in college football because, for whatever reason, different ways that they're umpired, different ways that their games are called from a penalty perspective. You put the guy on an island and something bad is going to happen if you do it too often. So you want to make sure you limit those kinds of things. And you're right. I've seen them do better at getting after quarterbacks, not just by trying to bull rush everybody and think that you can overpower everybody. And maybe that is a lesson that was learned overall and I think you mentioned it this way, you can't just go out there and think because we have more talent than XYZ team, we're going to beat them. You have to still game plan, and you still have to do things, and you can't just vanilla your way over an Oregon or a Penn State like you did Central Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. They're not the same level of talent. They've got really good players too. And I think, that Penn State game, I learned a lot about tenacity. That was a tough game. And I thought they played really well in a tough environment in that game, and did not let the environment get to them, and did not let the moment get to them, and understood where they were. Still makes the Michigan game inexplicable, but that's, yes. I really did think they played well against Penn State and did a good job on both sides of the ball in that game.
I like to wipe the Michigan game clear of my memory now, because it was just an utter disaster. There's no other words to describe it. You even mentioned, and I think everyone that knows anything about, even slightly about college, knows that they ran the exact way that Michigan would want them to run, want them to game plan, run into the teeth of the defense. They didn't do it. They learned from it. Their offense even struggled against Indiana, as Ryan Day pointed out. So they needed some time to readjust that offense. They had the defensive game against Oregon where they were like, listen, we're going to have to change things up. This isn't going to work for us in the long run. They did. They made those changes. This is the difference with having a team like Oregon in the Big Ten now, someone that can give Ohio State that. This is what you're going to see when you go against the best of the best. You can run all the way through the Big Ten and then get in those bowl games and like, whoops, hey, we got to do something here. These teams are better than we thought. We're not just the best just because we showed up. So it's changed the dynamic a little bit, and I think both of those losses were really good for galvanizing this team and really making the coaches and the players realize, hey, it's time to work harder. we're not going to be satisfied with losing another game now.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's tough when a conference is top heavy, when it's just Michigan and Ohio State and nobody else was really challenging for that supremacy. That means you can kind of get through the season, and whoever wins the game is going to be in the playoff. And I think in a 14 playoff now, if that were the case, it would still be, they would both end up in the playoff because it would just be the two of them. I like having a conference where you've got 4 good teams, maybe 5 solid teams, where when you get to the playoff, you know that they've at least gone through some battle-tested moments, right? And SEC fans will complain that, well, you didn't play 4 good teams, you only played 2. That's true. Oregon only played 2 good teams. They played Ohio State, they played Penn State. Those are their 2 really good conference games. One of them in a championship game. But it doesn't matter because you're battle-tested in a way that I don't think you would have been. Oregon wouldn't be battle-tested in the Pac-12. They would have steamrolled whatever was left of the Pac-12 if they had been in the Pac-12 this year. Steamrolled them, and it wouldn't have been close. And who knows then, that means you haven't been battle-tested. You haven't had to go on the road in your 8th consecutive week of football to Madison, Wisconsin at a night game and play in that environment and find a way to say offense has won every single game this year for us. Defense needs to step up today. And they did. The defense stepped up against Wisconsin and made some plays. Sure, that's easy because the Wisconsin quarterback wasn't great, but I think they showed how to win in tough moments when everything's not a cakewalk, everything's not steamrolling. And I think Ohio State, same thing. They learned from playing good teams. If you don't play good teams, you don't get better.
Yeah, and you have to take that punch in order to stand back up and be like, hey, this is where I got to go. I got to swing harder now. I got to dance more. I got to get out of the way. I got to block.
This is the good thing about a 12-team playoff. Any other year, Ohio State's not in the playoff.
No, not at all. They wouldn't have made it.
It's Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. That would have been the Final Four.
And that's the interesting point about it. If this wasn't a 12-team playoff, Ryan Day might not have been coach anymore.
Might not have survived.
Which is really interesting how this dynamic changes because, that's one of the things that Ryan Day's been preaching and the team's been preaching. This is a new season. We're starting all over again. And with that 3-week layoff, it was like a new season. You had time for camp to install different plays. Now, the 10-day turnaround is completely different. I think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, because they're kind of for lack of a better word, chip off the old block, Ryan Day's a protege or a product of Chip Kelly. And they need that time sometimes to develop a game plan against a better team. You saw how much time they had against Georgia when Georgia was a dominant team and they came out and played after that Michigan loss. The Michigan loss, as much as I want to ignore it, it was a good thing. It was a good thing for this team. They needed that. They absolutely needed it. And I got to get to this I Junior. I'm going to call you I Junior because that's what it looks like to me. He's scared about Oregon, how they will attack Burke and Igbinosa because of the game you saw before, yes. And Burke struggled last time. And Igbinosa, at one time, he was the most penalized person in the NCAA. Most penalty yardage in the NCAA. Don't know if that's the case because the last couple of games he hasn't had as much, hasn't drew as much penalties. But pass interference, he liked to grab. He just liked to grab jerseys. Now it may be more justified against a team like Oregon where you have to grab a little bit. And I've heard they have the ACC referees like they did last week, which weren't calling any pass interference. It didn't matter which team. And then this is interesting, so we can get your take too. I know this is more a Buckeye slant, but Syracuse currently, McCord is now ACC single season passing leader all time. Klatt and Gus are taking some shots at Ohio State. Is this game on right now?
It is. It's actually, I've got it on in the background, but it's so far away I can't actually see what's going on. It was 35-21 at half. I don't know what it's at now. I assume based on some stuff I've heard that Syracuse is continuing to scoring at will against Washington State.
And, I don't know if I want to touch this. All I know is hearsay from last year. I wasn't around the Woody last year. I didn't have the access that I have now, so I can't speak personally. from what I heard and from different sources, it was he wanted to be guaranteed that he was going to start. Him and his dad both wanted that guarantee that he wasn't going to have to work to start. If he didn't get that guarantee, he was gone. What I'm told is he didn't get guaranteed, so he left. Whether that's on him or whether that's on Ohio State, have at whatever opinion you want to have on that. Sometimes it's better for both parties to just leave and move on, and it looks like it worked out for him, and sounding like it's working out for Ohio State too.
Yeah, what I knew about it was similar things that I had heard. I don't know if it's that cut and dried of guaranteed in the starting spot. It's probably a little bit more nuanced than that as far as the discussions that were had, which I'm sure surrounded NIL and how that was going to factor into what his future looked like with them. And I would imagine that the combination of, hey, we're going to bring in this, maybe we're going to bring in a transfer and we're going to let you compete. And that's going to reduce the amount of NIL you can get, because if you bring in a transfer quarterback, you're not doing it saying you're not giving him some money. So if you have to take your quarterback money and split it between your existing starter and a transfer, that reduces what he could. So I imagine that it was probably around both of those things. The fact that you're bringing in a transfer and now you're taking away some NIL opportunities. He went where he gets some NIL, and he knew, he had a relationship with Fran Brown through, I read about it. I think Kyle's dad worked with Fran Brown's wife at a hospital, and they knew each other that way. And so that's how that relationship developed. And Syracuse probably was a good fit for him. I don't know that it was a better fit. He still threw 12 interceptions this year. He threw 6 last year. He still completed. I looked at it. His completion percentage this year was the exact same as it was a year ago, 65.8%. So he's completing the same percentage of passes. He's still making some gutsy throws that end up interceptions, which means they're probably not good throws. They're probably, he's taking shots that he has to take because Syracuse isn't a great team, doesn't have a real lot of great talent around him like he would have had at Ohio State. And maybe it did work out the best for both, because is Ohio State where they're at with Kyle McCord back there? I don't know. That's a hypothetical that I can't answer at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you too. Definitely had some of that on the NIL, because if you're getting a demotion, essentially, all right, hey, we're taking away money and you might not be a starter. That's like your boss saying, hey, we're going to take away some of your paycheck because you weren't meeting productivity. So next year we're bringing in someone that may take over your position. So,
or we're giving your accounts to this other person, so you have to go develop new accounts.
Yeah.
Thanks, boss.
Good luck.
Thanks, boss.
Still a one-read quarterback. I didn't watch that much of him, to be honest with you. I did not watch a lot. I do remember that one game where he had like 3 pick sixes, and he did have some athletic ability where he dove into the end zone. Mainly just highlights. Once he was gone, it's off my mind now, really. Syracuse isn't really a team I like to follow much anyway. I'm not big on ACC football. What can I say?
The ACC has 2 teams, although 3 now because SMU had a pretty good year. But I agree. It's tough to watch because when you're doing, I host tailgates for all of our members, which means I get down to the stadium on Friday night and I watch games that I can, but I'm tailgating, and it's background noise at that point. You're still kind of chatting with all your members, and you're still. We had commits while I was sitting there on Saturday prepping, so I had to go write articles, little things like that. So I didn't watch a ton. I didn't get to watch as much other teams as I want to sometimes. And then when you're in the press box, you don't see anything other than what you're watching. You sort of see highlights up in the corner, and hey, such and such is winning. Okay, great. So you're right. It's hard to see. I didn't watch a ton of him. I know he's had a good year. I don't watch a ton of the ex-Oregon players. I know what they're doing. I know Dante Thornton played for Tennessee. I don't know if you knew he was an Oregon guy first. Had a good season for them, and I know he thanked Oregon on his way to the NFL. But you're right; it's tough to watch ex-players when you're trying to deal with your team and the coverage you have to provide for your fans.
Yeah, and when you're at a game, you're there for a day, a whole day. I didn't get home from the Tennessee game until 3:30 in the morning.
Yep, that's if I didn't tailgate with an RV, that's my life because, I live 100 miles away from the stadium. You tailgate for 6 hours before the game. You drive down. You have to leave at least 2 hours before that. So now you're 8 hours before game time. So a 4:30 game, you're still leaving at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and you don't get home until a 4:30 game is a benefit because I get home at midnight. The 7:30 games, I got home at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and those are brutal days.
It is. It's tough, but it's worth every minute of it. It's fun. I mean, it's a lot of work, and that's something that people don't realize. But that's for another day. Let's get back to football. Let's get back to this game, the Rose Bowl. How excited does the Rose Bowl have to be to have two of the traditional teams in it? They couldn't have got a better draw than this. Sometimes it makes me think that this bracket was made like this just so they could possibly have that. The Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. They have a lot of power. They got what they wanted. Ohio State versus Oregon. This might be the best game of the playoffs.
It would have been interesting to sit in that room and hear if that was even mentioned by the playoff committee, because you're right. That is one of those little things that people said, hey, if we get them at the 8th seed, then they'll play Oregon in the quarterfinals. And man, would the Rose Bowl love that? Would they love us? I'm sure there's a little bit of that in there. It's tough, though, because of this guaranteed bye for the top 4 conference champions. That put teams at the 4 seed that probably don't deserve the 4 seed and the 3 seed. Those two teams probably aren't the 3rd and 4th best teams in the country or even in the playoff. Do they deserve did Boise State and Arizona State deserve a bye based on who they were? I don't think so, but that's the way the rules were written, so they got it. If they had seeded it accurately, I think that's a different story because then you're getting it where this game should be. This game should be in the national championship game. Flat out, it should have been.
And maybe not because Ohio State had the 2 losses, so it was hard to give them credit coming off a loss.
You could still put them on the other side of the bracket.
You could, absolutely. And
I think that should have been the case, but that's just me.
That makes me a little bit upset that Ohio State and Oregon are scheduled to play each other. You don't see 2 SEC teams in the second round playing each other.
And you wouldn't have unless somehow Texas and Tennessee faced each other, and that's still not till the 3rd round, right? So I agree. I think they were in a tough position because of that Michigan loss. I really think if Ohio State doesn't lose to Michigan, then they're not an 8 seed. They're a 5 seed, and they're on the opposite side of the bracket.
Doug in the locker room said he spent an hour after the game looking for his truck and still got home before 1:30. It's hard parking at Ohio State if you're not real familiar with it. Biggest fear, Ohio State has to – this is exactly my mindset. When you're saying it's a close game and Ohio State has to kick a field goal late in the game from more than 35 yards, it's actually the 30 to 39-yard range where Fielding struggles the most. He's actually pretty damn accurate from 40 to 50. 50 plus, terrible. I think just 0 for 1, 50 plus.
I think with college kickers, a lot of this comes down to where they're at on the field because of the width of the hash marks. They aren't as – they just don't get as much time to work on the craft. And those kicks from a hash mark, sometimes you're too close and you don't get the right angle on your kick and it sails or it does this or it does that. NFL kickers spend so much time. That's all they do. I got to imagine they kick, 1,000 kicks a week. And I don't think college guys can do that kind of practice and they can't spend as much time with that. And they have closer hash marks. So that makes your field goal lineups a little bit simpler to deal with. When you're, say, a right foot kicker and you're on the left hash, it's really easy to yank that ball. It's really easy to yank that ball.
Yeah.
And when you get from the 40 to the 49, the angles go away. You sort of take those out because you're further back out and you have some area for error on that kick. Even if it's slightly off, it's still got room for error unless you really pull it. But which is what I pointed to people. That's why there was nothing guaranteed about that first game. If Will Howard gets down a half a second earlier, you're not guaranteed he's going to make the kick.
For sure.
That's a hypothetical that, man, there's so many hypotheticals that you could go back to that it is going to be, does a field goal kicker win it? I don't know. I sure hope not, because Oregon fans are historically traumatized by some field goals from the past. Some stuff that was missed where game-winning field goals missed, or you don't even take the game-winning field goal because you know the guy's going to miss it. They're traumatized from some stuff that happened 12 and 13 years ago. So even if they had the best kicker in the nation, they'd feel like, I don't want it to come down to that. They want it to come down to whoever has the ball last wins, because I think there's a confidence in Dillion Gabriel. He's very calm under pressure. The fact is, he's played better in the big games than he has in some of the lesser games. You know, he threw 2 interceptions against UCLA. They're not a good team, and he throws none against the really good teams that he plays. So I think, nobody likes relying on a field goal kicker in college, I don't think.
Let's see. We did not talk about Jordan Birch being back. How much of a difference is this going to make to the team being healthy?
I think the difference is that it gives you a third guy that's a good edge rusher, and now that creates fewer reps for everybody, and it keeps people fresher. And I asked Mateo about that today, and he agreed. He talked about it in his interview, his press conference. Having your guys be a little bit fresher, just maybe it's 5 less snaps. That means that's fresh legs coming off the edge versus dead legs. Mm-hmm. That is a big thing. Jordan Birch, as Dan Lanning said earlier this year, God doesn't make people like Jordan Birch very often. He's 6'5", he's 300 pounds, and he moves like he's 240. He moves like a tight end at almost 300 pounds. Mateo Uyunglele could have been a tight end in college. That's, some people thought he was going to switch to tight end. They were wrong, but he's that talented athletically. Now you've got that extra fresh set of legs coming in. Birch missed some time earlier in the year. He missed the Ohio State game with a lower leg injury, and I think he's just back into full 100%. This month off for Oregon has really been helpful with the little nicks and dings that everybody suffers during a long season.
Yeah. So let's get to this kicker situation from the locker room. We have Ohio State fans are not good with kickers either. That Georgia game, man, we should have won a natty. There's a lot of times where we say we should have won a natty. As Ohio State fans, we say that a lot. We should have won a natty. We should have won a natty. Back to the Cooper days, we should have won some natties there. But Michigan State got us once. Michigan got us once. Bobby Bowden was denied 2 national titles by missed field goals.
Wide right.
Before he broke through. Yes. So these field goals, college field goal kicker situations are not fun. Not fun at all. And you want to win the game without having to go down to that. So I don't think Ohio State would be confident when they go down and try to win with a last-second field goal too.
It's tough. Oregon's field goal at Ohio State was under 30 yards. That's, and Sappington is pretty good in that automatic range. It's what happens when they're outside of 40. That's when you always worry, because pressure, right? These guys are not NFL kickers yet. So how do they respond to that pressure outside of 40 when literally it's 3 seconds on the clock and it's win or lose based on what you do right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't shank it. Whatever you do not shank this kick. So last game, the 12th, October 12th, never forget it. Never forget that game. The 2 turnovers, Derek Harmon comes through their middle and just uses that body weight to pull that ball out of Junkin's hands. Also, you had the onside kick. That's a play that you probably never see again. Maybe, once in a generation type of play where you kick it off of someone, you get it. They saw something on film, and Dan Lanning, I think in his post-game press conference, said that was something that they were actually trying to do. They saw something where maybe Ohio State's hands team was not paying attention. They were turning and running. I'm not sure, but it worked. Also, you had that 12-man penalty. We talked about it earlier. There were a lot of situations where, if you get 2 turnovers and the other team doesn't get any, that gives you 2 extra possessions. That's a big change in a game, a big swing in a game.
That is. And I think, you're right. Dan Lanning did comment on that, and it was something very specific. It wasn't the hands team, it was the regular return team. And he did notice that particular player, and it was that particular player had a tendency to turn his head as soon as the kicker started approaching the ball. So he was turning his head before the ball was kicked. And they knew they were going to kick it directly at him try to get it to bounce off of him. And who was right there? The kicker. They knew what they were doing. That was a specifically designed play in the moment. And that's one of those things where coaches are doing their homework. And by the way, Chip Kelly did the same thing against Stanford in 2010. Wow. Yeah, 2010 at home, the game day game. To open the second half, he did an onside kick because he recognized that they were dropping too quickly and that Oregon had a chance to get the ball. And the ripped. That's just one of those things. That's just a play that a guy makes. It's so hard to fault Judkins for that because a guy like Derek Harmon comes in and just rips the ball out of your hands. What do? You can practice all you want, and there's sometimes a guy just makes a play. I think.
What's he, 310? Yeah. I mean, he got on that ball and just used his body weight to pull that out. There was nothing you could do.
Yeah, and then he turned so that there was no way you could get it back. He turned his body kind of like your body for a rebound. That's what it was. He basically took a rebound away from him.
Yeah.
He boxed him out. There was no way he could get around because he's 207 and Derek Harmon is 310. That's a 100-pound body weight advantage. When you box somebody out like that, I don't care how strong you are, you're going to lose that battle.
For sure. So winning the turnover battle, I think that's a key to this game too. As it is a key to every game, you have explosive plays. They had 8 plays of 25 yards or more, and the Dillion Gabriel touchdown that was 27. I think he said 28 yards, so it was somewhere between 27 and 28 yards. Those are big plays. They changed the momentum, the psyche of the game. Football's an emotional game, especially at the college level. Overcoming those emotions is something that every team has to do. So if you get explosive plays, that makes a talent equated game flip in the favor of the explosive play team every single time.
I agree. And the emotion part is hard to overcome because they're still, with a few exceptions now because of COVID seasons and extensions of careers, they're still 19, 20, 21-year-olds. And it's difficult for those people of that age to control their emotions still. That's not the thing that they're best at yet until they're 25, 26 years old. And I think you have to recognize that is something that really, really good teams are able to harness. The Ohio States, the Oregons, the Georgias, they harness those emotions in a way that is helpful most of the time. Sometimes they're not harnessed well, as can be experienced by Trayshawn Holden. He let his emotions get the best of him, and it cost him not just that rest of that game. He missed, I believe, 2 games after that before he finally got back into the good graces, earned his way back from stuff he did off the field with the staff and with the team. But when you give up big plays, that also affects you emotionally. So, the offense that makes the big play, they get this emotional boost. And that changes the way they approach things. And the defense gets this emotional beatdown when they give up. And give up one big play, you're probably not going to feel too emotionally upset about it. But when you give up 6, 7, 8 big plays down the field, that starts to wear on you. You start to sometimes overthink what you're doing. And that is
going to happen again.
Always dangerous. And that's when you make it happen again. It's why, cornerbacks always say, next play. Because there is not a cornerback in history, not Deion Sanders, not Darrell Green, not Darrelle Revis when he was at the top of his game. There's no cornerback in history that hasn't given up a big play. You better be ready to come back and be just as cocky and arrogant the next time you face that receiver. Otherwise, that receiver owns you.
Yeah. Once they get it, it's over. And that's what the best ones do. They forget about it, move on, and find a way to stop them the next time. If you put that in your head where I just got beat, man, I don't know what to do. I just got beat. You start getting antsy, you're burned every time. Like you said, the receiver owns you then. You're just going to keep picking on that fish. Urban Meyer always called it, I want to find my fish, and I want to go after him.
And you start overthinking should I be in this leverage or that leverage? Should I be doing this when that guy gets up here? You start overthinking, and sometimes some of these players have to remember you have to trust your skill, and not that can't always happen. Sometimes people make these mistakes, but I think that's what makes for compelling football. It's why I like college better than the NFL. It's compelling in a way that the NFL can't be, because these are still people who play the way we played when we were in grade school and out on the streets or the fields just playing ball. They still play that way a little bit. They're obviously smarter than we were about it. And I think there's a compelling aspect to that creates emotion with the fans as well. And that's why I can't fathom being as much of a fan of NFL as I am of college.
I'm not. It's hard for me to sit down and watch NFL games when college football is still in existence. Once those playoff starts in the NFL, then I can start being like, you know what? It's time to watch some NFL football. I'm good to go. Once that national title game's over with.
In the NFL, I have to get past the first round, the wild card round.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get excited about it. It's just, it's kind of like watching rivalry week. There's a couple of good games, and that's maybe it. Most of the rivalry games, who cares, right? Do I really want to see Wisconsin, Minnesota? Not that much. Do I want to see Michigan, Ohio State? Yes. Do I want to see, and now it's not even there anymore, really, Oregon State? I did. But, the wild card round, the NFL, no thanks. It's just not interesting.
Not until they're ready to play for all the marbles. That's different in the NFL.
It's conference championship games and Super Bowl. That's when I start really paying attention in the NFL. For
sure. Oh, man, I'm so excited about this game. You said you're driving down Monday?
I leave Monday. I'll just see how far I can get because, it's always a crapshoot when you're driving from Oregon to California because there's a mountain pass in between that can get dicey in the wintertime.
That's not Grants Pass.
It's past Grants Pass. It's the Siskiyou Pass. Okay. You go through Siskiyou Pass, which only gets up to about 4,300 feet, but it gets dicey at times. So, I don't even know which route I'm going until Monday morning. Okay. So I may have to drive all the way down the coast to San Francisco to the Bay Area and then cut over to I-5. It takes an extra 2 to 3 hours to do it that way. If I push myself, I can get 13, 14 hours out of a day, and I can get pretty close. So that's my plan, is to get as far as I can on Monday so that Tuesday I have a little bit more time to actually do things. One, I have to drive all the way to downtown to get my credentials, and two, I'd like to be able to do some prep stuff on Tuesday night.
Absolutely. Well, I think we got through everything that we need to get through. It's just keys to the game for me. Turnovers. I think you said time of possession was a big one to keep the offense off the field on the other side. You want to hold on to that ball, drive down to the field methodically, and get your points that way without letting the other team get a chance to get that ball in the end zone too. I agree with that. But I think turnovers and explosive plays are going to be the key to this game. That's the thing I want to look out for the most. And who's getting pressure on the quarterback?
Yeah, I like turnovers, rushing yards, and explosive plays. And the pressure on the quarterback, I think, limits explosive plays. So that's why I say explosive plays are the thing. If you're not getting explosive plays, that generally means pressure is getting the quarterback, and he's not able to see down the field very much. So I like the three things are rushing, explosive plays, and turnovers. If a team wins two of those three, I think they have a really good shot at winning the game.
All right, Scott. Well, I appreciate you joining us. Always a pleasure. Last time we were a different outlet before. It was not Buckeye backers. It was Big Ten backers at the time. So thank you for joining this show, and hopefully we'll see you in Pasadena.
I will be there. We'll try to hook up.
All right, my man. You take care. Right. God bless everyone. Buckeye backers are out.
Talk to you soon.
All right. We'll see you. Sunny Pasadena.